Some serious allegations this morning facing the State Department.
That's right. According to internal State Department memos, the agency might have called off or intervened in investigation into possibly illegal and inappropriate behavior within its ranks, allegedly to protect jobs and avoid scandals. This concerns the time that Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. We want to get right to NBC's chief White House correspondent Chuck Todd with the latest. Chuck, good morning to you.
Good morning, Savannah. You know, there's an old saying in Washington that the cover-up is worse than the crime. But in this case, both parts of it are disturbing. Allegations of prostitution and pedophilia, and allegations that those crimes were somehow covered up or not looked into. So the State Department this morning is having to respond to those claims and those investigations of misconduct by State Department officials, including by an ambassador and security agents attached to then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And the allegations are that these investigations were whitewashed, quashed altogether, and that those orders came from high up.
Hey friends, Sean from SGTReport.com here with some very important news regarding the investigation known as Pizzagate. As many of you know, Alex Jones has recently issued an apology to Comet Ping Pong owner James Alefantis, and you can watch Titus Frost's angry response to that in the more info section below. I'll link it below. But I want to talk about Pizzagate, a term that was coined after the release of the WikiLeaks Podesta emails, because it's very clear now that the powers that be, both within the mainstream media and some vectors of the alternative media, are circling the wagons to try to discredit those of us that have been spearheading Pizzagate research and trying to talk about the investigation into pedophilia and child trafficking known as Pizzagate.
The 60 Minutes team reported that Cernovich's articles include a fake sex cult story about Hillary Clinton's inner circle.
Let's throw out the word Pizzagate and let's just talk important facts. I want to level set for Breitbart News journalist Lee Stranahan, who has taken it upon himself now to label Pizzagate as fake news. In his latest video titled, Lee Stranahan Explains Why Pizzagate is Fake News and Hurts Alt Media, Stranahan talks about the stages of what he calls Pizzagate mania, or derangement.
And I'm going to use Pizzagate as an example here, but there is such a thing as fake news, and Pizzagate is it.
Allegations of prostitution and pedophilia, and allegations that those crimes were somehow covered up or not looked into. So the State Department this morning is having to respond to those claims.
And I'm going to explain why. And then I'm going to explain the way people get deranged about it. And you can watch it take on my own timeline, okay? So I kept going, and I kept looking at these different claims, and none of them were adding up to me.
A State Department memo says the ambassador, quote, routinely ditched his protective security detail in order to solicit sexual favors from both prostitutes and minor children. The memo also says a top State Department official directed department investigators to, quote, cease the investigation.
And furthermore, now here's where it gets weird, and this is why I say stages of Pizzagate mania or derangement, is then I noticed when I would say things like, well, okay, where's the proof of this? People would say, aha, you're a pedophile. Ah, you're a shill for Podesta. You're a pedophile shill for Podesta.
I would just like to point out to Mr. Stranahan that what he is doing is absolutely the opposite of real journalism. He's conflating and picking and choosing and taking small bits and pieces of evidence from within the Pizzagate investigation and trying to disprove the entire thing. And I want to remind Mr. Stranahan and anybody else in this world that describes themselves as a journalist that contrary to reports in the mainstream and now alt media, that the crowdsourced investigation labeled by some as Pizzagate did not begin with internet sleuths digging through the WikiLeaks Podesta files releases looking for pizza parlors and encoded language discussing human trafficking. It began with the shocking discovery that Hillary and Bill Clinton provided assistance to convicted child trafficker Laura Silsby, resulting in a reduced sentence for child trafficking. Now I'm sharing this with you from William Craddock in Disobedient Media, who wrote, Silsby was arrested at the Haitian border attempting to smuggle 33 children out of Haiti without documentation. Her sentence and charges were reduced after an intervention by Bill Clinton. In the aftermath of Silsby's arrest, her originally retained lawyer Jorge Puello was also arrested in connection with an international smuggling ring accused of trafficking women and minors from Central America and Haiti.
Allegations of prostitution and pedophilia, and allegations that those crimes were somehow covered up or not looked into. So the State Department this morning is having to respond to those claims.
The revelation of this news was either ignored by Western media or attacked by Clinton-controlled publications. If Mr. Stranahan is unfamiliar, let us remind him that Laura Silsby is the former director of the New Life Children's Refuge, and emails from her organization can be found in the WikiLeaks Hillary Clinton email archive discussing the NGO before her arrest. Silsby's organization also appears in Clinton's emails soliciting donations for their quote-unquote ministry. Silsby was reported to have a history of bad debts and unpaid wages. Mr. Stranahan, this isn't fake news, it's just news. On January 29, 2010, Silsby was arrested with 9 other American nationals attempting to steal 33 children from the country, most of whom were not even orphans and had families, according to some reports. CNN reported on February 9, 2010, that this was not the first time Silsby had attempted to traffic children out of Haiti. Haitian police, acting on a tip, had intercepted Silsby in an earlier separate attempt to remove 40 children out of the country. She was turned back at the Haitian border. For a brief period, Haitian authorities were considering adding a new kidnapping charge based on this evidence. Hillary and Bill Clinton took an extraordinary interest in Silsby's case from the moment she was arrested and almost immediately stepped in on her behalf. Mr. Stranahan, that's not fake news, that's just news. And as it relates to Pizzagate, let's dig a little deeper. Here's an NBC News report from 2013, Mr. Stranahan, which you may find interesting if you actually care about pedophilia, child trafficking, and the investigation into these claims.
Some serious allegations this morning facing the State Department.
That's right. According to internal State Department memos, the agency might have called off or intervened in investigation into possibly illegal and inappropriate behavior within its ranks, allegedly to protect jobs and avoid scandals. This concerns the time that Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. We want to get right to NBC's Chief White House correspondent Chuck Todd with the latest. Chuck, good morning to you.
Good morning, Savannah. You know, there's an old saying in Washington that the cover-up is worse than the crime. But in this case, both parts of it are disturbing. Allegations of prostitution and pedophilia, and allegations that those crimes were somehow covered up or not looked into. So the State Department this morning is having to respond to those claims and those investigations of misconduct by State Department officials, including by an ambassador and security agents attached to then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And the allegations are that these investigations were whitewashed, quashed altogether, and that those orders came from high up.
NBC News has obtained documents related to ongoing investigations into some disturbing allegations involving State Department personnel and at least one ambassador. A State Department memo says the ambassador, quote, routinely ditched his protective security detail in order to solicit sexual favors from both prostitutes and minor children. The memo also says a top State Department official directed department investigators to, quote, cease the investigation into the ambassador's conduct.
Mr. Stranahan and the rest of you mockingbirds in the media, I would just like to point out that's not fake news. It's news, and it should be reported to the American people that there appears to be a far-reaching child trafficking and pedophile ring in and around Washington, D.C., embedded within the highest corridors of power of the U.S. government. And whether it's called Pizzagate, Pedogate, or just what it is, child trafficking and pedophilia, it should be researched, discussed, and reported to the American people. And I would like to remind Mr. Stranahan that his own former boss and founder of Breitbart News once tweeted how Prague guru John Podesta isn't household name as world-class underage sex slave op cover-upper defending unspeakable dregs escapes me. Mr. Stranahan, that's not fake news. It's just news.
The whole system is set up to cover these atrocities from the beginning. That's why we've got units in police stations that are supposed to deal with child abuse. They're there to cover up, like we experienced